before I get, because we're getting ready to get into the Burnside attack down at the lower bridge.
Yes.
And I understand why. This tends to be one of the more popular spots on the Antietam battlefield, and it's because of the bridge. The bridge is very famous. It's
very scenic.
The photographs, the paintings.
Right.
But there's a lot of what I find the most interesting about this part of the battle is, I mean, I find the fighting obviously interesting, but the thing I find the most interesting is all the stuff that happens at the command level and all the confusion that's going on between Burnside and the other guy that was supposed to be in charge. I forget his name. The other guy that was supposed to be in charge of the Ninth Corps, and then also the debate between whether McClellan's orders are clear to Burnside, or if Burnside has taken his time or it misinterprets the orders. So that being said, I guess could you give us a little background on what's going on with Burnside and the Ninth Corps?
Okay. We really have to go before the day before the battle on the 16th. So that afternoon, McClellan's very active. You know, he did not stay in his headquarters. He's very active the day before. He's making sure that everybody understands their orders. He's going to go and visit Hooker the evening before. He's going to go visit Burnside the day before. And when he comes to Burnside, now there's some confusion about who's in command of the Ninth Corps now. And we're not certain what really happened. When there was, as McClellan is moving north from the Washington area, he's going to divide his army into wings.
One's under Sumner. Correct?
One's under Sumner, one's under Franklin, one is under Burnside. And he's going to dissolve the wings on the eve of the battle. And according to Jacob Cox, Burnside never writes about it. According to Cox, and Cox wrote a lot, how Burnside would not believe that the wing structure was abolished. He still commanded that wing.
And Cox, just to clarify, is who replaced Reno as the Ninth Corps commander.
That's right. So he was a division commander from Ohio. He could replace Jesse Reno after he's killed at Fox's Gap. And according to him, Burnside would not take command of the Ninth Corps. He's going to stand right beside Cox, and when a courier comes with orders, they'll hand it to Burnside. Burnside will look at it, hand it to Cox. Now, there's some who believe that Cox was exaggerating, that he's basically he's scapegoating Burnside for what happened. We don't really know. There was no real other indication that we found of what happened.
What is your take on it personally, just having an understanding of Burnside in general?
Burnside is an interesting character. He had his real problems at Fredericksburg.
Of course.
But what I like about Burnside was that he knew his capabilities. He would not command the Army of the Potomac. He knew it was above him. The Peter Principle was not going to work on him because he knew his capacity. He had just gotten back from North Carolina where he had all these major victories.
Right. He had a very successful campaign.
He did.
I mean, I don't know the number of forts that they end up capturing, but it's a large swath of the coast that he ends up claiming for the Union.
North Carolina.
And then after that, he links back up, I guess, with the Army is he there for Second Manassas?
He's there, but yes, he's there, and he's going to fight at Second Manassas.
I thought I couldn't remember clearly.
Yes,
he misses the 7 days though.
He's in North Carolina then. Yes.
Now, and another thing a lot of people know about Burnside is at one point you were talking about it. Lincoln offers him after he's thinking about firing McClellan, and he offers Burnside command of the Army of the Potomac, and he says Mac should be the one. Mac meaning
and they're good
George
friends.
McClellan. And something before the. From my understanding, Burnside was down on his luck. He had invented the Burnside carbine, but it had really not taken off at that point.
That's right.
And he had to sell the patent on it, which is another sad story. And then he needed a job, and his friend George McClellan from West Point gave him a job in the railroads, right?
Yes.
Now, a caveat: the Burnside carbine is the third most used carbine by the Union, from what I understand, in the war. I think that I could be wrong, but I think that's it.
It certainly was used.
And he didn't make a dime from it because before the war he sold the rights to it. Sad. That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't really know what happened. We do know that he is going to be scapegoated by McClellan during the campaign. And they had this pitched battle on the 14th at Fox's Gap. And, it was, some would say, and I don't know where Burnside was during most of the fighting, but it was really not Jesse Cox, it was Jesse Reno who was in charge of that fight. And the Northern forces could have overwhelmed the Confederates earlier in the day, but they did not. And it's not until nightfall that the Confederates are going to pull out on their own. And the travesty, according to McClellan, is that he being Burnside, allowed the men to sleep at Fox's Gap that night rather than pursue the rebels. And not only that, and I'm going to step back and say that's not, Brad, you're wrong. He was supposed to get his men moving early in the morning of the 15th.
And he let them rest longer.
He let them rest.
That.
And here comes General Sykes, who commands a division of the 5th Corps. And they're supposed to be going over Fox's Gap. And you get all these guys from the 9th Corps just sort of lying around. And McClellan was furious. And I've never seen this. An official correspondence from the Army commander to a Corps commander demanding to know why he did what he did. Usually they'll take him aside. Usually they'll talk to him. He wanted this. He was so furious. He wanted this in writing.
Well, I wonder if that kind of plays into there's going to be a lot of blame cast on McClellan, obviously, for his Peninsula campaign, and then thus the 7 days battle after that.
Right.
I wonder if McClellan is trying to cover his bases almost. This time I'm going to make sure if I have someone that doesn't do something I want him to do, I'm going to get it in writing, official, so that it can be tracked and they can see that it wasn't like my call to have this happen.
McClellan was an interesting character. He has the rap of being slow, of being not the most aggressive. He did pretty well during the Antietam campaign, but he had this cloud over him after the 7 days. And I think that he felt that that Lincoln was overly harsh with him. He didn't like that Lincoln was taking a hands-on approach. And the two were clashing about this. And I think this influenced his behavior during the campaign. He's going to be much more aggressive because he has to redeem himself. And maybe, yes, and maybe he's going, as a way to not cast aspersions on himself, he's going to scapegoat whoever he can, and it happens to be Burnside. So what happens then is during the day before the battle, McClellan will come over and meet with Cox and meet with Burnside. Who's in command of 9th Corps? We don't really know. I know if it really matters that much. And they look at the bridge, lower bridge, Rohrbach Bridge, which is about 125 feet long and about maybe 12 to 15 feet wide. And they all agree there is no way 12,000 guys are going to be able to go over that bridge that's defended.
Even though it's defended by a small number of
But they didn't
Georgians.
really know that.
And when you go there and you see that terrain, we were talking about choke points in the last episode.
Yes.
And I'm going to be honest with you, as a infantry guy, that is a Christmas present just being laid right in your lap.
Right.
If you're those Georgians on top of the hill, even though there's only, it's basically a skirmisher line.
They don't have very many, 400 to 500 to defend that crossing.
that whole crossing.
Yes.
That being said, you are shooting. We mentioned this before, the sunken road, fish in a barrel. This is truly fish in a barrel.
Right.
You have you clearly have a defined starting point and ending point, and as long as you stop them before they get to that ending point on the bridge,
Right.
You're good. As long as you have the ammo, you can sit up there and pick them off all day.
Right.
And I mean, I wouldn't want to have to, I wouldn't want to be faced with the prospect of having to cross that bridge and gain a foothold.
Yes. And, again, we should step back and look at McClellan's plans. The bridge has no significance. What McClellan was trying to do is early in the morning, he's going to hit Lee's left flank. He says, if that's not successful, then I'm going to hit his right flank. But in order to get to his right flank, he's got to get into position after crossing Antietam Creek. The 1st, the 2nd, and the 12th Corps, it was basically undefended, so they could just stroll across. Here, you got 400 to 500 Georgia boys on a position that you can only dream of. It's like magnified by 10 times, essentially. And they realize there's no way that we're going to be able to get over that bridge under enemy fire. And they remembered that a farmer said that there was a ford downstream. So the thinking is they'll send their chief engineer downstream on the 16th, find that ford, and they'll position about 4,000 guys, Yankees, under Isaac Grodman, who will then, at the morning of the battle, cross over and come behind, flank the Confederates, the Georgia boys, and drive them away. And the attacks on the bridge would be diversionary. They would not be the major attacks because they could not succeed. That was the plan. And it all went downhill and unraveled when the engineer gets off his horse on the 16th and gets into the water, and he's going to test to see, is this actually the ford? And as he's coming through the water, these Georgia boys, there aren't a lot of them, definitely a very thin skirmish line at that point because it's further downstream. They open fire. And he says, I'm not doing this. They can't pay me enough. He's unarmed anyway. And he says, that's a ford, gets back on his horse and tells Burnside and Cox that's where the ford is. So in the morning of the battle, Isaac Rodman, 4,000 guys, and the rest are, in the area of the bridge. And so here's where the scapegoating begins. McClellan, at about 9:40, I believe it was, in that general area, around 9:30, will send a message to Burnside/Cox, take the bridge, begin your attack. And Burnside/Cox will launch their first attack at 10 in the morning. And McClellan will say, he waited till 10 in the morning. He should have done it much earlier. Well, the orders are very, very clear. It was to be. He got the orders about 9:30ish. So you can't blame him for that. You can blame him maybe for his men resting at Fox's Gap, but not this. And so the first attack is going to happen at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it involves George Crooks's Ohio Brigade, which had fought at Fox's Gap. These are Ohio boys. And everything is confused. Crook has no idea where the bridge is. He thinks Sturgis, who's launching the second attack after him, has already attacked. And that attack goes nowhere. And Burnside and Cox said, we don't really care because this is diversionary.
Right. They're still waiting on Rodman to cross the ford.
And Rodman isn't crossing the ford. They're not hearing, they're expecting to hear gunfire downstream, and there's no gunfire. Turns out it wasn't the ford. So Rodman has to march downstream to find the ford. So the next attack is going to be happening at 11 o'clock in the morning. And the next two attacks will be under men from Daniel Sturgis's division. And the first attack is going to be 11 o'clock. And they're running literally parallel, on a road parallel to the Antietam Creek. And they're imagine they're not coming this way, they're coming this way. They're actually paralleling the rebels and they will blast them to pieces. And again, so it goes nowhere. And Burnside and Cox say, okay, we expect that. But where's the flanking action? They still haven't found the ford. So you get to the noon era. And if you're standing at the bluff where the Georgia boys are, you can see in the distance there's a big hill beyond the bridge. And that is where you have most of Edward Ferrero's brigade under Daniel Sturgis. And they're going to make the next attack, the 12 o'clock attack. Takes a little while because these guys are not interested in attacking the bridge. This is the 51st Pennsylvania and the 51st New York.
The twin 51st,
yes.
Right?
And they're at the top of the hill. Now, this is, someone in a unit history explained this as happening. We don't really know if this is true or if this was made up, but the whiskey story. So here's Edward Ferrero, who was before the war a part-time dance instructor at West Point. Here's the West Pointer. His father was a professional dance instructor. He's a dance instructor at West Point. He's eventually going to command a division during the crater in that area during the Petersburg campaign. Not the most effective commander. Some say he drank too much. But anyway, he says to the men, are you going to take that bridge? He's getting them all riled up.
Yeah.
And they all yell out, no, we're not, especially the Pennsylvanians. We're not taking that bridge. And he's shocked. He says, what do you mean? You took our whiskey ration. Now, some infraction, whether they all got drunk, whether they didn't obey orders, what do? You pull the thing they value most, their whiskey ration. We're not taking that bridge. That'll teach you to pull our whiskey ration.
Right.
Wow.
He says, well, wait a minute. What if I restore it? In fact, what if I give you as much as my purse? He actually used that word. They called him purse. Purse will permit. Will you take the bridge then? They said, yeah, we'll take it then. If you promise us lots of whiskey. Yes. So it's now like closer to 12:15, 12:20. And the two regiments will come running down. They're going to bull their way across. That's the plan. Bull their way across the bridge. There's a stone wall. If you're standing where the Georgia boys are, to the left of the bridge, there's a nice, beautiful stone wall.
On the far side of the river.
On the far side.
Or the creek.
Of the creek. On the other side, there's a fence where the New York boys are coming down. And they get to that area, and the gunfire from the Georgians is so intense that they can't go any further. And the Pennsylvanians are going to stop behind that stone wall, and the New Yorkers are going to lie down behind the fence, and they're stuck. It's probably 12:30-ish or so, 12:35. They can't go forward. If they go back, they're going to get shot in the back. So they're not going, they're just stuck. And the Colonel Potter of the, I think it was Robert Potter of the New Yorkers, somehow makes his way across to talk to Colonel Hartranft. I hate that word. I can't pronounce it. Hartranft of the Pennsylvania boys. He says, listen, I think we can take this bridge. I'm watching what's going on at the top of the hill. They're not fighting. They're not firing like they were. I think we can take it. And the Pennsylvania colonel says, knock yourself out, essentially. He's got this nice stone walls. Men are protected. The New York colonel says, fine, goes back. He says, men, get up. We're taking the bridge. And they're getting up. They're heading toward the bridge. Pennsylvania colonel looks over and says, I don't like the optics of this. Men, get up quick. And supposedly the two regiments are crossing over the bridge at the same time.
Oh, my gosh.
That's what's supposed to be happening. Well, the New York colonel was right. These guys, remember, the Georgia boys have been fighting since 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it is now close to 1 o'clock. So they've been fighting for 3 hours. They're getting hit by enemy artillery, not a lot, but still they're taking losses. They're running out of ammunition, and they're getting reports. The Yankees are coming behind us. Let's get the heck out of here.
Because Rodman finally found the ford.
Rodman found the ford.
How far is that? For how long did he have to? Just out of curiosity, did he have to move from the lower bridge to make it to the
It's
ford?
probably about a mile or so.
But it's through
downstream.
some terrible terrain.
Yeah, it really was.
And he's trying to find the ford.
He's got to find it. So he has to stop and look, and maybe some men have to jump in the creek and check it. And so at 1 o'clock, the bridge has fallen. But that's only the beginning of the problems. You got to take 12,000 or so Yanks from the Ninth Corps, and they got to cross over that narrow bridge, across that ford, and they found another ford further upstream. It's going to take a while. And so it's not until about 3:15 that they're in position for the final attack